Right, okay. Okay, so the Ramban at the beginning of the parasha explains the concept of what the covenant, the bris that Pinchas is given is. Yes. Yeah, I see. Pinchas ben Elazar, Dia Kodesh Baruch Hu Moshe. Ramban tells us that Hashem made known to Moshe Shishalim Schar Tov LePinchas Al Kinosoi Asher Kinei Lekov, on account of that he would pay him a good reward on account of this act of vengeance that he did on behalf of for Hashem, but tzedakah, and on the righteousness, the idea that it would be considered to be a tzedakah. In other words, it's a righteous act. The fact that he did to achieve this atonement with Klal Yisrael, it will then die in the plague. But Tzivo, and he commanded him to make known to Klal Yisrael, to the Jewish people, that he would be a kohen forever. And that's what it means when it says lochein emor. That's what it means. Therefore, you shall say. Okay. The idea being that this is a statement which is made to the Moshe Rabbeinu is told that Pinchas will be rewarded. Okay, and the idea is that reward that will be given to him, there has to be an information given to the whole of Klal Yisrael that he will be a kohen forever. V'zetam lochein emor. That's what it means. Therefore you shall say. Therefore it shall be said. In other words, Yagid Zeh Yisrael. He should tell it to Klal Yisrael. It doesn't say that it should be for him and his children after him as a kahuna forever, an everlasting kahuna, as it says with regards to Aaron HaKohen, Aaron himself, right? It doesn't say that. The word that you find with Pinchas is the word bris, is a covenant, right? A covenant. V'omes brisi shalom, you find it twice. He's given a covenant of kahuna forever, and it says my covenant of peace. So the idea of a bris. Sheyitin lo bris im hashalom dovak boy. That he has to have a covenant, that he's given a covenant with the peace, and that is that is attached to it. So in other words, the idea being there seems to be a connection. There seems to be a connection between the bris and the shalom are connected. This covenant and the peace, the idea they come together. So and he says, what does a dovak bo mean? What does a dovak bo mean? Be attached to him. They explain here in the footnotes that some Abu Savla, who says that midah keneged midah, it's measure for measure, right? He was makane leilokov. In other words, Pinchas conducted this action for Hashem, and therefore he led to a form of shleimus, a form of completion, right? That's what he says. Okay, somehow that is a form of completion. These are, I think, deeper sort of mystical ideas. But the idea of his act brought about a completion. There was something missing, and he brought about a sense of completion. That's sholem, completion, and therefore he receives the peace with the bris with the peace. With Aaron, it says that with l'choved l'tzifares, that's what it says. The garments that are given to him. Okay, it says tiferes, it says kovod, but it doesn't say. It doesn't say the same thing with Pinchas. And that's why here it says a shekine lelokov. And the idea being that with Aaron it says the which is a very lofty level, but it doesn't say a covenant of peace. Okay, Pinchas, it doesn't say that. Pinchas, it says that there is this idea of chibur, this idea of connection, and this idea of wholesomeness and completeness because of his actions. He says "Vamaskil Yovim," which is always the words that the Ramban uses when it's a deeper, sort of more Kabbalistic idea. The one who's intelligent, he says, will understand this idea. So there's a very unique status of Pinchas. The Hizkir, and the reason, says the Ramban, that it mentions the shame Ish Yisrael Mukeh v'Shemu Isha Mukah. Why does it mention the names of those people who were killed? Lo dia, to tell us ki roy oil eschah hagod lazeh, that he was fitting for this great reward, Shehorak Nosi Yisrael, because he killed a prince of the Klal Yisrael, of Bas Melech Goyim, and the daughter of the king of the Goyim, v'lo yorei mehem, and he wasn't afraid of them. Bekinosoi leilo kov, in his act, his jealous act for the sake of Hashem, that meant he was unafraid. Yeah, he was unafraid. Yeah, okay. They ask a question. The Re'im asks, Rabbi Mizrahi asks, they bring this, right, that this idea that he wasn't afraid is only relevant to the man, Zimri. He wasn't afraid of attacking Zimri, right? With the Isha, with the woman, right? Why should he be scared? Why should he be scared of the Midjan? Why should he have the Midjanis, right? Why should he be scared of the Moabite woman? Yeah, but there wasn't any fear there. There wasn't a fear of retribution as such as there was with him. And he says the reason with Cosby is to show how hated the Midjanim were, and that's why he mentions Cosby's name. And after the reward is given to the tzaddik, to him, he's commanded to extract punishment, to punish the Rishoim. You have to cause a problem, to fight the Midjanim. But first, he's told to count the people first. That's why it says, because first they had to count the people, and after that, they would come to fight and wage the battle against the Midjanim. Now, what is the word b'nichleihem? I don't want to see all of this next Ramban, maybe just a part of it. B'nichleihem means their plans, right? The plots that they underwent, that they did this. And he says, this is B'nichleihem kashepi rashti. He refers you to what he's explained in Parshas Balak. This is the next Ramban. They thought this evil thought. As it says, the Moabite said to the elders of Midjan, they took advice from them first, right? They gave this advice to Moab, that their daughters should commit adultery, commit prostitution with them, right, with the Bnei Israel. We know the whole plot was in order to make them attached to idolatry. That was the whole idea. Then they changed it. Even if it's not mentioned there, right? That was the whole idea. The idea was, even though it's not mentioned, at the end of the day, this was the idea. This is what Moab enticed Midjan to do. And furthermore, Bas Malcolm, there's no Simoim. Sorry, the Midjanites gave the advice to Moab. There's no Simoim. They even sent their princess to commit this adultery with them. If not for the fact that it was done with the highest level of authority, right? The advisors to the king. What on earth is a princess of Midjan doing in Moab, right? Unless to come with a camp of war with others, with a camp with others. What on earth was she doing there? They were in Moab at the time, in the plain of Shittim. What on earth was this Midjanite doing there? What was she doing there? Unless first term she was very beautiful. The Shulcho Shom Zikni Midjan Shom. So the elders of Midjan decided to send her there. Ki Omru B'Toyesh Yofer Rabim Hushchasu. So Posuk, it's brought in. No, this is actually, it says it's brought from down in Yevomus. No, Posuk, that there was an ability to lead them and to destroy many of them with her beauty. V'Koravu Shoygam Bilom Beitzazu. And he says it also makes sense that Bilom was also involved in this piece of advice. Because when he went back from Eretz Moab, of Arba Midjan, he went through Midjan. Because his way was from there. He was one of the advisors to the king. Maybe he was held back there to know what would be with them. Therefore, that's how Klal Yisrael found him in Midjan, v'harguhu, and they killed him, there, right? They killed him, right? So that's how that's how it was. They identified, and therefore he says Pirush Vayokom Bilam Yelech V'Yoshev Limkomi, when it says that Bilam went back, Shahalach Loi Lo Shuv El Artzo. He went back to he intended effectively to go back to his land, but he hadn't yet gone because he really stayed in Midjan, right? In Midjan, and that's where they found him. And when it says Sorar Esa Midjanim, that was the part of what they had to do. They had to attack the Midjanites. Okay. Yeah. The Chainiri says, Ki Yisrael yargu amisnabe. Yisrael would only kill the one who prophesies. That means Bilam, Rak b'Rishus HaTorah, only with the permission of the Torah. When they said to them that they are oppressing all their plots that they had plotted, all those who plotted were obligated, were destined, and had to be killed, not just some of them, and that included that's why they killed Bilam as well. Right? What was that? Yeah, because they knew that he was the one who had given this evil piece of advice in the first place, right? In the first place. So therefore, that is how Cosby ends up being here, and that is how Bilam ends up being here as well, and why he is also swept up in this as well. Okay, and this as well. Yeah. Okay. So now let's just skip a little bit here. He goes on to explain why it is that Hashem wanted to. We know that they were told not to afflict Moab, but they were able to afflict Midjan. They were able to afflict Midjan. But yes. So that's where he goes to. I want to go to the end where he says a Medrash Acher, the last paragraph.
It says that it
was the Beno. Yes. It was the Bnos Moab, but it was the Midianites, okay, who, that's what the Ramban is saying, who encouraged them to do so. They gave them this piece of advice to encourage them to do this with their daughters, and they sent this Midianite princess. But there was a difference between Midian and Moab because they weren't allowed to attack Moab, right? Yeah. Now, as we know. Now, what is the reason why they weren't allowed to attack Moab? So the Ramban first brings the Gemara in Bava Kama, okay? And the Gemara in Bava Kama asks this question. The Gemara in Bava Kama, so we can see this bit as well. If you look at it, Vani Tema, skip the next paragraph and do the one after. Vani Tema, can you see the next, yeah? Where it says Vani, the fourth paragraph of the Ramban, Pasuk Yud Ches. Yeah, Vani Tema, he says. Because the Gemara in Bava Kama brings a reason. Why was it that they did not attack Moab?
Oh yeah, much further.
He says, I'm astonished at the language of the Agadah. They said in Bava Kama, right? Al Totzares Moab. Do not attack Moab. Would Moshe think to attack without permission? Why does he have to be told not to attack? Moshe made a straightforward kal v'chomer. Omer, he said, Midjan just came to support Moab. Omer Torah, Toras Midjanim, there's going to be a whole war against the Midjanites. So Moavim Atzmon, the Moavim themselves, who are the main instigator, the main people involved in this, the Benos Moab, right? Lo Koshkin, how much more so? Omer Lagosh Baruch Hashem said to him, Lo Kishal Al Daitcha, no, not as you thought, because Shtei Predos Yeshli Lahotzi Mehem. I've got these two special people, doves that are going to come out of them, and who are they? Rus and Ma'aviyah, the Nama Ho'amonis. Rus and Nama, they're going to come from them, and as a result, they have to survive. When they came to the Kal V'chomer, before the Kal V'chomer, Moshe Rabbeinu was told about the Moavim. I think this is the Ramban's question, where he finds this more difficult. But they were told clearly not to attack the Moabites. And furthermore, if because the Kal V'chomer, why did he have to tell them to warn them against the not to attack Ammon? Maybe they weren't particular about in the language of this Gemara. Yeah. So then then he goes on to explain effectively what he's saying is, if you're looking at this Kal V'chomer, then it should be he has difficulties with the Kal V'chomer basically. Okay. He says, it is revealed in front of him, in front of Hashem, that when he commanded him to attack the Midianites, Moshe Rabbeinu would have a kal v'chomer to wage war against Moav without other permission. That is what he would make that kal v'chomer, right? To attack them. But he told him first, do not do so, because he's told clearly, do not attack Moav. And therefore, because he told him not to attack Moav, he was also told to as well about the Bnei Ammon. Because Ramban's problem was, why does the Torah need to tell him explicitly not to attack Ammon? Why would he think he should? He might think that they weren't allowed to attack Moav, but they were allowed to attack the Bnei Ammon, because they also didn't do nice things to them, and that is why he has to be told clearly, do not attack these two. They're not allowed to be attacked at all. He would think that they should be attacked. Okay, they should be attacked because the fact they didn't behave appropriately. They still know they must not be attacked. Then he brings another medrash. Well, midrash acher, another medrash is the Moabites acted because of fear, because they were worried they were going to take spoil from them, right? They were going to attack them and despoil. But the Midyanim got involved in a battle, a fight that wasn't theirs. There's a very important point about the distinction. It's actually, he says in the notes, it's in Parshas Matos. There's a big distinction between Midian and Moav. Moav had a real reason had a rational reason to be afraid. They were worried the Jewish people kind of would despoil their land. But Midian had no reason to fear. They weren't there, they weren't attacking them and everything else. They got involved in a battle, a fight that was not theirs. Okay? In other words, that's the Medrash. The Medrash is telling us why it was that Midian was attacked, not Moav. Yeah? Because Moav had a legitimate reason to be afraid. Midian did not. They got involved in a fight that wasn't theirs, therefore they suffered more. Another pshat he says is like this, and now he comes on to Lot. Eretz Ammon and Moav, Hashem nitnon libnei Lot. The lands of Ammon and Moav, Hashem gave it to the children of Lot. Yerusha, ba'avur Lot, Aviem, as an inheritance because of Lot, their father. Shesharas es tzaddik, who served the tzaddik. The Gola imoy la eretz ha'aretz, and he was exiled with him to that land. Right? That's what happened. He went into exile. Therefore, there was no permission to do them evil in their land. Because of their sin, that they distanced the Jewish people. But they didn't bring them close. He punished them to distance them from his people. But Tziva, and he commanded, that's why they're allowed to marry in midah keneged midah. This is a very beautiful pshat the Ramban is bringing here. Ramban is saying, why do we find this distinct difference in approach between Moav? On the one hand, we seem to be nice to Moav. Al totzares Moav. Do not attack the Moabite. On the other hand, a Moabite is not allowed to marry a Jewish person. That was the whole thing with David HaMelech, remember? Right? The Chiddush with Rus. The Rus was a Moabitess. She was Moaviyah, not a Moavi, and therefore she had to be a special permission. And there's a whole thing about how they excluded her because it was only for men, not the women. But so what is it? Do we like Moav or not? There's Ramban, very simple explanation. It all depends. The land of Moav was to be protected because it was there that Lot had gone with Avraham into exile, into that land, okay? And shown his solidarity and support with Avraham, and as a result, their land was protected. But what did they do? How did they behave? The Moabites behaved in such a way that they distanced the Bnei Yisrael. They refused to give them lechem umayim. They didn't give them, so we distanced them. You understand? That's why we don't marry into them. So it's middle, connected middle both ways. Does that make sense? The land is protected because that's where Lot went in support, That's midah keneged midah, and it's also midah keneged midah that we drive them away because they drove us away. That's what the Ramban is saying, right? And that's the whole explanation. Basically, the whole idea of this Ramban is to try and trace what's happening with Moav. Why is it that Moav doesn't suffer the same fate? He brings a number of different explanations why Moav doesn't suffer the same fate as Midian. Okay. Okay, let's just see. I wanted to see further forward. Why was it, if you go to Perek Chav Zayin Pasuk Gimel, why was it that when it comes to the Benos Tzolofchot, there is a need for them to say, Perek Chav Zayin Pasuk Gimel, V'hu lo hayah, right? That they said their father wasn't involved in Korach and everything else. Ki b'cheto meis. He died as a result of his own sin. Now the Rishonim struggle with this because they want to understand what is it. Why do they need to say that? Why do they need to say he died because of his own sin? They're talking about their father. They could have said he died. Why does he die because of his own sin? The different explanations given. Some say it was the Makosha Sheitzim, the one who gathered because of these words, right? Maybe some say he was the one who gathered wood on the Shabbos. Yeah, that's why he died. But the Ramban says, because they were going to say that he died as a result of his own sin, they had to say that he did not die as a result of the sin of those who complained, and not the of Korach, Shitzu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, fought against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Lashon Rashi. He died of his own sin, and he didn't encourage others to go along with him. So Rashi basically tells you the pshat, because they wanted to say, because they needed or wanted to say he died of his own sin, they had to spell out that sin wasn't Korach or all those who complained or whatever. It was a separate thing. The Ramban asked though, but the Ramban asks on Rashi, the Rashi doesn't tell us why they had to say he died of his own sin. You understand? Rashi is explaining, you know why they had to say it wasn't Korach, and it wasn't, because they were going to say he died of his own sin. Well, why did they have to say he died of his own sin? They could have just kept quiet, right? They could have just said, our father died in the desert, he had no children, no sons, and everything else would have flowed very straightforwardly in the whole parasha of the daughters of Tzolofchot, right? That's a fitting to be said. That's suitable to be said, right? Presumably, simple pshat means, why should they mention their father's sin? Why was it necessary? Yeah. According to Chazal, they had to say shlohoya b'adas korach. They had to say that he wasn't part of adas korach. That was a separate thing. Nothing to do with what they said about him sinning, about his own sin, right? They had to spell out that he wasn't part of korach. Lefisha adas korach lo ho'elam chenek ba'aretz, because they had to set out their stall. What were they trying to say? They were trying to spell out why it is that we are entitled to a part of the land. So the first thing they had to clarify was he wasn't part of Korach. Why? Because if he was part of Korach's company, they wouldn't get a chelik in the land, right? Right? It's nothing to do with what they said about. You understand? Rashi is saying the only reason they had to spell it out was because they were going to say it was his own sin. Therefore, they had to say, well, it wasn't Korach. Ramban says, nothing to do with each other. They had to say it wasn't part of Korach independently of what else they were going to say. Why? Because they wanted to stake their claim in the land. And they will not have a part in the land if their father was part of Korach, because Korach forfeited his part of the land. Okay? Yeah?
When we talk about part of Korach, we mean one of the 250.
I think so, yes. I think exactly that. Exactly that, yeah.
Because their families survived.
Yeah, yeah.
Only Korach's family did.
Yeah. Because Adas Korach didn't have a portion in the land, right? And similarly, those who complained, he says, inside the Adas Korach, right? That's the whole Eidah, yeah, together with them. This was heard clearly from the Beis Din of Moshe Rabbeinu. They wouldn't get a part in the land. The Kach Pirish of Ram, which is the Ibn Ezra. And he says, the bonus, the daughters felt, Kilo Yarshu HaNoedim Al Hashem, that those who gathered against Hashem, those who their descendants would not get a portion inside the land. So this is the Ibn Ezra's pshat. I think that's also why he's saying they brought together that he wasn't amongst those who gathered against Hashem. There might be those who complained. Yeah, no, sorry, it's all together. Noedim Al Hashem Adas Korach. Yeah, okay. So you understand. So he's brought two explanations so far. Now one Rashi. Rashi says the only reason he had to spell out that he wasn't part of Korach was because they wanted to say it's his own sin. So he had to say, well, don't think it was Korach. The two are linked together. Ibn Ezra says, nothing to do with it. They had to spell it wasn't Korach to show why they were entitled to a part of the land. Now he brings his own pshat. V'daiti v'derach pshat. My opinion in the pshat is as follows: She'omru, that they said kacha ba'avur. They said this because shechoshvu sheMoshe Rabbeinu hayosone ados Korach yosem kol hachotim. A very interesting Ramban says that they said this because they thought to themselves, Moshe Rabbeinu detests the Korach more than anyone else, more than all of the others, all the other complainers and the problems. The worst was Korach, right? They were all the others that died in the desert. Because they were the ones who rose up against him. They denied all of the actions of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Choshvul, right? You understand what the Rabban's saying? What Korach to Moshe Rabbeinu, they thought to themselves, the Boson of God is the worst possible. They were the worst possible group. Why? Because their actions weren't just a rebellion on one point. By denying Moshe Rabbeinu's legitimacy, which is what Korach was doing, yeah, he was undermining the whole project from the beginning, everything, right? See, they thought maybe with his hatred of them, Yomai will say, there should be no kindness to their descendants and no grace to his orphans. There will be continuous remembrance of their sins. You know, as it will be attached to them. Therefore, that's why they informed Moshe Rabbeinu that they weren't part of Korach. They wanted to make clear that they weren't coming from that group that they wanted nothing to do with, or in that, right? And they hinted further, they weren't part of the deaths of the plague, but they died on his own bed. And the reason why it says that he died of his own sin, they said, Bamidbar Ramban is a simple pshat. Do you know what it means? His own sin. It means he died in the desert on account of his own sin, like all the other men of that generation. That it wasn't a unique sin, like the one who gathered wood. It was the group, that whole generation who died, who did not merit to enter the land because of their actions with the spies. Right? Or he says that he could be like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Levi, the Mashorer, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, Kuzari, Shepirush, that it's attached to the fact that he didn't have children. Basically, I think he's saying that no, he didn't have sons. Sorry, yeah, right. He says that that was the account of his sins. We're going to say he didn't have sons, and therefore, as a result, that's why I wanted to say that's why I mentioned the chait, linking to the fact that they didn't have sons. So that is what he says. It was one of the second. It was one of the points to show you. Yeah, the Ramban has a thesis, if you like, in the whole of the Korbanos. Just very briefly, if you look at the very last Ramban on the Parsha, Perek Lamed Posuk Aleph, Vayomim Moshe Bnei Yisrael, he says there's a parallel. If you look at you see that the way that the Parsha of the Yomim Tovim, beginning with the Parsha Tatomid, begins and ends with the Bnei Yisrael. Sav es Bnei Yisrael, v'martu aleim, yeah? And at the end, it also says the Bnei Yisrael. Now, this is a bit surprising, right? And the Mefosh will try and understand what the place of the last posuk is in the Parsha. Vayomim Moshe Bnei Yisrael, k'choil asher tziva Hashem es Moshe. What is the place of that posuk? Rashi says because the next parsha, the parsha of the Matos, begins the speech of Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, this is an interruption going back on what's previous. Moshe Rabbeinu said to Bnei Yisrael everything Hashem had commanded Moshe, right? But the Ramban picks up. The Ramban he says this is difficult to understand because you find other parshas where you find the same phrase. It says with the mumin, the blemishes, Vaydaber Moshe al Aaron Vel Kol Bnei Yisrael, right? You find other places it says that. So he says, this is 1, 2, 3, I don't know, it's about 6 lines in. Avol kfi pshuto. According to the logical, simple explanation, I don't know if you can find that. It's about 6 lines into that Ramban. According to the simple explanation, Bo'akos of Loma, the Posuk is coming to say, Ki afal pi, Even though this parsha, which is talking about korbanos leyachid bo Aaron abonov, there's a distinction between this parsha in Pinchas and the ones in Emor, because in Emor it specifically spells out that it's speaking to Aaron and his children. They're the ones who bring the korbanos. Doesn't say that. Here it says that all of the Bnei Yisrael, like everything Hashem commanded Moshe, whether it's in regards to not doing work, all the things that are mentioned, the Talmud and all the Korban Musaf, because this is what it says, Tzavas Bnei Yisrael, the beginning, it says Tzavas Bnei Yisrael. This parsha is directed to Bnei Yisrael. So it's a question, you understand? This is Korbanos. Look in Parshas Emor, and you see the emphasis on the Korbanos is what? Aaron. They're the ones who are going to bring the Korbanos. So it's strange and unusual that this parsha, the whole second half, is also Korbanos. So why is the emphasis to Bnei Yisrael? It should be Aaron and the Kohanim. They're the ones who are bringing the Korbanos. He says the reason is because this mitzvah applied after they entered Eretz Yisrael. The Hazar Yisrael Kulam, and it was a warning to all of Klal Yisrael. Yishmeru b'moyadim. They have to be careful to guard the Yomim Tovim, Atmidin Ramusofin. Everything that takes place, the Musaf offerings, the Akriva, Hanadorim, all the free will gifts that have to be offered up. Everyone is responsible. Which is a quote from Esther. Yeah, these days have to be mentioned and kept. The rest from them with all labor, melacha of labor. So the point is like this: that all I'm trying to highlight here, and this is one small little piece of this Ramban, is there is a specific emphasis in Parshas Pinchas on the whole, the responsibility of all of Klal Yisrael, and in that way, it's different to Emor, right? This is about the fact that Hashem is saying that these will apply, the Musafim will apply once you enter Eretz Yisrael, and you have a responsibility altogether as a nation. It may be that the Kohanim are the ones offering it up, but in order to make sure that these days, primarily talking about the Yomim Tovim, right, have that status. Nizkorim v'nasim, he quotes that posuk in Esther, which is referring to Purim, yeah? The days are recognized and sanctified and made holy and special and not doing melacha on them and all the things you have to do with Yom Tov. That is not something you can delegate to the Kohanim. And that's why, according to Ramban, it says, Vayom Meshel b'nei Yisrael. You understand? These Yomim Tovim will only be what they need to be once you enter Eretz Yisrael, if you collectively as a people sanctify them. That's Ramban's explanation. And that's why you got the beginning is Tzavas B'nai Yisrael, and the end is Sefer B'nai Yisrael, even though ostensibly you would think it's directed to the Kohanim. You understand? That's what he's saying. All right. I'll leave it there.
Right.
Thank you for joining. Have a very good Shabbos. Shabbos, Danny.
Thank you.
Pleasure.